From Watergate to Epstein, power, secrets, and the architecture of elite scandal. Political scandals are rarely just about crimes. They are windows into how power actually operates. When a scandal breaks at the highest levels, it does more than embarrass leaders. It exposes hidden circuits of influence, loyalty, and protection that normally operate out of public sight. Watergate did this in the 1970s. The Epstein scandal does something similar in the 21st century. Together, they form a disturbing mirror reflecting how elite networks function across generations. To understand the connection, we must first look beyond headlines. Both scandals triggered a deeper fear in the public imagination. The suspicion that powerful people may exist inside protective systems that ordinary citizens can never access. Watergate shattered the myth of presidential invulnerability. Epstein shattered the myth that wealth and social status guarantee moral legitimacy. The similarities begin there. The closed world of presidential power. In the early 1970s, the White House functioned as a tightly sealed environment. Nixon's inner circle operated less like a public office and more like a guarded fortress. Loyalty was currency. Information was compartmentalized. Decisions flowed through a small group of trusted aides who believed they were defending not just a president but an entire political order. Watergate revealed that this inner circle had constructed a private intelligence culture inside the executive branch. Surveillance, political sabotage, and covert operations were normalized within that space. What shocked the nation was not simply the break-in at the Democratic headquarters. It was the discovery that a presidency had quietly built its own shadow system. The Oval Office tapes later confirmed something psychologically important. Nixon and his advisors spoke in a language of siege. They believed enemies were everywhere. The logic of self-protection justified extraordinary actions. In that environment, legality became secondary to survival. This is how elite systems often collapse. Not through a single reckless act, but through a culture that slowly convinces itself it is above ordinary rules. When the cover-up began, it followed the same logic. Protect the institution at all costs, silence witnesses, redirect investigations, preserve the inner circle. The irony is brutal. The attempt to shield power ultimately destroyed it. Watergate as a structural shock. Watergate did not just remove a president. It forced Americans to confront the machinery behind executive authority. The scandal revealed that power concentrates naturally. Left unchecked, it builds protective layers around itself. Advisors protect leaders, agencies protect administrations, political parties protect their own survival. For a moment, the system cracked open. Congressional hearings, investigative journalism, and judicial rulings pierced that protective shell. The public saw how decisions were made behind closed doors. Trust collapsed because citizens realized how much had been hidden. After Nixon resigned, reforms followed. Campaign finance laws tightened. Oversight expanded. Transparency became a political slogan. Yet, something more subtle happened. Watergate introduced a permanent suspicion that elite institutions might always carry hidden compartments. Even when reforms are enacted, the memory of secrecy remains. That memory becomes part of political culture. The Epstein network and the return of elite suspicion. Decades later, the Epstein scandal ignited a similar reaction, but in a different context. Jeffrey Epstein was not a president. He was a financier moving through the upper atmosphere of global wealth. His social world included billionaires, royalty, academics, and politicians. Photographs Flight logs and testimonies suggested access to circles that rarely intersect with ordinary life. This is where the scandal transformed from a criminal case into a symbol. Epstein represented the possibility that elite networks operate with their own rules. His properties functioned as private environments shielded by money and influence. When allegations of trafficking emerged, the public reaction was not limited to outrage at a single individual. It expanded into a broader suspicion. How could someone embedded in such powerful circles operate for so long? The question itself destabilized trust. Unlike Watergate, Epstein's world was not a government office. It was a social constellation of wealth, privilege, and connection. There was no single institution to investigate. Instead, the scandal scattered across jurisdictions, lawsuits, sealed records, and media battles. This fragmentation created a vacuum filled by speculation. And speculation thrives where transparency is incomplete. Trump and the politics of proximity. Donald Trump's name enters this landscape through documented social proximity to Epstein in earlier decades. Trump has publicly acknowledged knowing Epstein socially and later distancing himself. No criminal court has convicted Trump in relation to Epstein's trafficking crimes. That legal reality is critical. But politics does not operate only on verdicts. It operates on perception, narrative, and symbolic association. In the Watergate era, Nixon fell because evidence created a shared national conclusion. In the Epstein era, information travels through fragmented media ecosystems. Audiences consume different realities. Some view Trump's association as irrelevant social overlap. Others interpret it as part of a larger pattern of elite immunity. The modern scandal environment no longer produces a single story. It generates competing mythologies. That difference changes everything. Where Watergate led to bipartisan abandonment, contemporary scandals often reinforce political loyalty. Supporters treat accusations as attacks. Opponents treat ambiguity as confirmation. The scandal becomes a battlefield where identity matters more than evidence. This is not just about Trump. It is a feature of modern power politics. Scandal no longer guarantees collapse. It tests the strength of narrative alliances, elite networks, and the logic of protection. Both Watergate and Epstein reveal a recurring architecture of power. Elite systems instinctively protect their own continuity. In Nixon's case, aides believed preserving the presidency justified obstruction. In Epstein's world, critics argue that social status and wealth created layers of insulation that delayed accountability. Whether one interprets specific events as conspiracy or structural privilege, the perception of protection is politically explosive. Democracies depend on the belief that no one stands above the law. When that belief weakens, legitimacy erodes faster than any single scandal can repair. The Epstein controversy amplified a cultural fear already present after decades of financial crises, corporate bailouts, and intelligence leaks. Many citizens suspect that elite networks form a parallel reality where consequences function differently. Watergate proved that accountability was possible. Epstein reopened the question of whether that accountability remains consistent across all social tiers. Media evolution, from shared narrative to fragmented reality. Another crucial difference lies in media structure. During Watergate, Americans largely watched the same hearings and read the same front pages. Evidence accumulated in a shared public arena. Consensus formed because information flowed through centralized channels. Today's media ecosystem resembles a constellation of competing realities. Social platforms, partisan networks, and algorithmic feeds produce customized interpretations of events. Scandal becomes content. Content becomes identity. Identity resists correction. This fragmentation makes modern scandals more persistent but less decisive. They linger without resolution. They generate heat instead of closure. The Epstein narrative lives inside that environment. Each new document release or testimony feeds ongoing reinterpretation. The story never fully settles, it mutates. An unresolved scandal breeds permanent distrust. The psychological impact of elite scandal. Watergate wounded American political innocence. Epstein wounds something broader, faith in the moral integrity of elite culture itself. When powerful figures appear connected to hidden wrongdoing, the public imagination fills gaps with darker possibilities. Even absent definitive proof, suspicion becomes a social force. It shapes elections, public discourse, and institutional credibility. This psychological dimension matters more than any single legal outcome. Democracies rely on emotional trust as much as constitutional design. When citizens feel excluded from the truth, they detach from institutions. Scandals accelerate that detachment. Nixon's resignation temporarily restored faith because the system visibly corrected itself. The Epstein saga lacks such a clean ending. Its open-ended nature fuels the belief that elite networks remain opaque. And opacity is the natural enemy of democratic confidence. The modern presidency under permanent suspicion. The comparison between Nixon and Trump ultimately reveals a transformation in how power survives scandal. Nixon governed in an era where institutional shame could end a presidency. Trump operates in an era where scandal is normalized as background noise. Survival depends less on avoiding controversy and more on controlling interpretation. This does not mean modern leaders are immune. It means accountability now competes with narrative warfare. The battlefield shifted from evidence alone to perception management. If future revelations tied to Epstein were ever to produce direct, undeniable legal consequences for major political figures, the Watergate analogy would sharpen instantly. History shows that decisive proof can still collapse power. But until such clarity emerges, scandal functions as a perpetual cloud rather than a lightning strike. And clouds can linger for decades. The deeper pattern, Watergate and Epstein, are separated by half a century. Yet they orbit the same central fear. That concentrated power breeds hidden systems of loyalty that resist exposure. One scandal unfolded inside government, the other inside elite social networks. Both force the public to ask the same question: who watches the watchers? Watergate answered with institutional correction. Epstein leaves the answer unresolved, suspended between investigation, speculation, and cultural anxiety. That unresolved tension defines modern politics. Citizens no longer assume transparency, they expect concealment and demand proof of honesty rather than trusting it by default. This is the true legacy linking both scandals. Not Nixon, not Trump, but the erosion of automatic faith in elite authority. Conclusion: scandal as a mirror. Every major scandal is a mirror held up to a political era. Watergate reflected the dangers of unchecked executive power. Epstein reflects the fear that wealth and connection may distort justice itself. Neither story is just about individuals. They are about systems under stress. When scandals erupt, they force societies to renegotiate the boundaries of power. Sometimes institutions emerge stronger, sometimes suspicion lingers. Either way, The relationship between citizens and elites changes permanently. Watergate ended with resignation and reform. The Epstein era remains unfinished, its meaning still contested. That unfinished quality may be the defining characteristic of our time. We live in an age where scandal does not end cleanly. It echoes, and echoes reshape history long after the original voices fade.